She stood at her parents' funeral, sobbing behind a black veil. Everyone around her believed she was broken. Just 3 days earlier, her parents had been beaten to death in their own bed. The alarm system had been disconnected from inside. The burglary was staged, and investigators couldn't understand who had the code. Then they noticed something in the daughter's behavior, something that didn't match a grieving child. And when they pulled the thread, what came out was worse than anyone expected. Every detail of this video comes from court records, police reports, and trial testimony. A single purchase exposed the person behind one of Brazil's most calculated family murders. To understand what happened that night, you need to know this family. Manfred von Richthofen, 49, was a German-born engineer. He ran Dursa, a public company managing São Paulo's road system. He supervised the Mario Covas Beltway, a project worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His wife, Marisia, was a Brazilian psychiatrist of Lebanese and Italian descent. Educated, well-connected. Together they had 2 children, Suzane, 18, and Andreas, 15. They lived in a mansion in Brooklyn, one of São Paulo's wealthiest neighborhoods. Their declared net worth was around 5.5 million reais. But investigators would later discover much more money hidden abroad. On paper, Suzane was the perfect daughter. Law student at the Catholic University of São Paulo, trilingual, ballet classes, good grades. Professors described her as polite and well-raised. But in early 2002, she started dating someone her parents couldn't stand. Daniel Cravinhos, 21, unemployed, uneducated, a daily marijuana smoker. Her parents forbade the relationship. Suzane ignored them. In July 2002, while her parents were on vacation, she moved Daniel into the mansion. When her parents returned, they were furious. Suzane asked them to buy her an apartment to live with Daniel. Manfred refused. He told her she could do whatever she wanted, but she had to earn her own money first. For Suzane, earning money was never the plan. She wanted a shortcut, and her father had just cut it off. By October 31st, 2002, Halloween night, the plan was ready. Manfred and Marisia went to bed upstairs. Downstairs, someone who knew the house layout, who knew the alarm code, disconnected it. The front door was unlocked. 2 men entered. They climbed the stairs. They beat the couple to death in their sleep. The killers staged a burglary. Papers scattered, drawers opened, cash stolen. But detectives quickly noticed the staging was sloppy. The alarm had been disabled from inside. Someone in the house was involved. The next morning, Suzane and her 15-year-old brother Andreas returned home. They entered together. Suzane called out for her parents. No answer. They went upstairs. They found the bodies. Suzane called the police. She was hysterical. Andreas was in shock. A 15-year-old boy standing before his murdered parents, with no idea of what had really happened. But the killers had made mistakes in staging the scene, and the lead detective spotted them within hours. Papers were scattered in the library, but in a pattern too deliberate. Drawers were opened, but nothing valuable was missing except cash. The disorder looked fake, and the alarm had been disconnected from inside. Someone with access had done it. Detectives began looking closely at everyone connected to the family. The maid, Manfred's colleagues at Dursa, Marisia's patients, the children. But it was Suzane's behavior in the days after the murders that turned suspicion into certainty. Within 24 hours, witnesses saw her in the family pool with Daniel, relaxed, cheerful. On November 3rd, her 19th birthday, she cried at her parents' funeral in the morning, then hosted a birthday party that same afternoon. Detectives noted every detail: the pool, the party, the boyfriend who never left her side. They needed something concrete. It came from Daniel's older brother, Christian Cravinhos. Just days after the murders, Christian bought a brand new motorcycle, paid in cash with 100 real bills. Far more money than an unemployed man could explain. Detectives interrogated him. Under pressure on November 8th, 2002, Christian cracked. He confessed. Daniel confessed. Finally, Suzane confessed. All 3 told the same story. Suzane had planned the murders for months. She wanted the inheritance. She recruited Daniel, who brought in Christian. On Halloween night, Suzane disconnected the alarm and unlocked the door. Daniel and Christian went upstairs and killed her parents in their sleep. Suzane waited downstairs. Together, they staged the burglary. At the police station, Suzane and Daniel were seen showing affection to each other, touching, comfortable, just 8 days after her parents' deaths. At one point, Suzane told the police chief she wished he would kill the people who murdered her parents. Then she turned and smiled at Daniel, the man who had done it. All three were arrested and charged with qualified homicide, the Brazilian equivalent of first-degree murder. While awaiting trial, Suzane was released under house arrest. What she did on national television during that time turned the country against her. In 2005, she gave interviews to Veja magazine and Fantástico, one of Brazil's biggest Sunday shows. On camera, she cried, trembled, begged for understanding. Millions watched, but behind the scenes, her lawyers have been coaching her to fake grief. The footage leaked. Outrage swept Brazil. Prosecutor Roberto Tardelli filed a motion the next morning. On April 12, 2006, Suzane was arrested again. The coach tears became one of the defining images of the case. A woman who murdered her parents, caught faking sorrow on national TV. The trial began on July 17, 2006. The contrast was striking. Suzane, a law student, polyglot, ballet-trained, raised in a mansion. The Cravinhos brothers, from a working-class background, unemployed. Prosecutors argued Suzane was the mastermind. She disconnected the alarm, opened the door, and had the most to gain. Millions hidden in Swiss accounts opened in her name when she turned 18. At trial, Suzane blamed Daniel. She claimed he forced her. Her lawyer argued she had no real motive. Daniel and Christian told a different story. Suzane wanted her parents dead. She convinced them. She planned everything. Her younger brother Andreas, now 19, testified for 3 hours. He asked not to face the accused. He dismantled the defense's claims. No abuse, no alcoholism. He revealed Suzane's manipulations after the murders. Emotional blackmail, attempts to control the inheritance, demands to inventory household items from prison. He confirmed a weapon hidden inside a teddy bear belonged to Suzane. He produced a document she had written, proof of her attempts to manipulate him. Prosecutor Tardelli highlighted 14 contradictions between the defendant's statements. In his closing, he asked for 50 years for each. He described Suzane as the architect of the crime, calculating, deceptive, fully aware. On July 22, 2006, the jury returned its verdict. Suzane von Richthofen, guilty, 39 years and 6 months. Daniel Cravinhos, guilty, 39 years and 6 months. Christian Cravinhos, guilty, 38 years and 6 months. The murders were classified as triply qualified. Victims defenseless, killed for morally reprehensible reasons. Under Brazilian law, the maximum time served is 30 years. Suzane was transferred to the Santa Maria Eufrasia Pelletier facility in Tremembé. Behind bars, she continued to make headlines. Psychiatric evaluations diagnosed her as a sociopath. In 2018, a judge rejected her request for early release, citing egocentrism and narcissistic personality disorder as traits directly linked to the crime. But the most important ruling came in February 2011. The court declared Suzane unworthy of receiving her parents' inheritance. The very thing she had killed for, she would never obtain. Brazilian law prohibited her from profiting from their deaths. She tried to claim alimony from her parents' estate, denied. She tried to influence the distribution of assets from prison, failed. Andreas, the 15-year-old boy who had discovered his parents' bodies, became the sole heir. He administered the estate himself. The inheritance Suzane had murdered for went entirely to the brother she had traumatized. There was another detail about Andreas that revealed how far Suzane's manipulation went, even before the trial. After the murders, a handwritten note surfaced, supposedly written by Andreas. A note of forgiveness addressed to Suzane. It said that forgiveness meant opening one's heart, that he had forgiven his sister and still loved her, that despite the pain, he was sure their parents had forgiven her too. The defense used it as proof that even her own brother believed Suzane deserved compassion. But at trial, Andreas testified he had been coerced into writing it. Suzane's lawyer, Dennis Valdo Barney, had pressured a traumatized teenager to produce a note of forgiveness to help his sister's case. Prosecutor Tardelli confirmed it, calling it a dirty trick. When Suzane was briefly released in 2005, Andreas went to see Prosecutor Tardelli in person. He told him he feared for his life. Suzane had shown up at the house where Andreas lived with his uncle and grandmother. She visited when his grandmother was alone, taking photos with her. Andreas and his uncle refused to let Suzane stay. His grandmother Lourdes forgave her granddaughter, but said she could not share a roof with her. Andreas never visited Suzane after Christmas Eve 2002. He never spoke publicly about the crime. When Suzane claimed she called him weekly during her release, Andreas rarely answered. When he did, it ended in arguments. In January 2023, Suzane von Richthofen was released on parole after serving 16 years. She moved to the rural area of Angatuba near Daniel's family. At first, she lived quietly. Then in February 2023, she announced on social media that she was opening an online store. The public backlash was immediate. She began a relationship with Felipe Zacani Muniz, a doctor. In 2023, she became pregnant. She gave birth to a son in 2024. In December 2023, she legally changed her name to Suzane Louise Magnani Muniz, taking her maternal grandmother's surname and her partner's surname. The von Richthofen name, the name of the family she destroyed, was erased. By January 2026, Suzane lived freely on parole in Bragança Paulista. Daniel Cravinhos had also been released and was reportedly married. Christian Cravinhos had been released, but was arrested again in 2018 after a fight and sentenced to 4 more years. Andreas von Richthofen never spoke publicly about his sister. He controlled the inheritance she had killed for. He rebuilt his life in silence, far from cameras, far from her. Suzane erased the family name. Andreas kept it. He remains the last von Richthofen who earned the right to carry it. Do you think justice was served? Were the sentences of the 3 convicts enough for a crime like this? Subscribe for more.